to welcome you all to the 5th Annual FoodTech Community Symposium. Today, we have with us entrepreneurs, startups, academia, government, service providers, investors, and of course the consumers. This represents together the whole food tech community. And this time, for the first time, the food tech community has broadened its reach and is now a global one. I would like to welcome our guests from the US, New Zealand, Japan, China, France, Italy, and Germany. Shtráoس Group decided a few years ago to take a pivotal role in shaping the food tech community. We have been doing so through Alpha Shtráoس, our open innovation platform, and through the kitchen, the incubator, the food tech incubator. These two initiatives are at the core of Shtráoس Group's strategic direction. The food and beverage market is undergoing a significant change. To name a few of the underlying forces, I will mention. One, value chain dynamics. Things like raw material volatility, organized retail, private label, etc. Two, the consumers. Eating not only for satiety purposes, people would like to get more. Experience, experiment, convenience, quality of life, functionality, etc. Three, market trends. There are many, obviously. I will mention health and wellness, aging population, and digital. And last but not least, sustainability. Things like scarcity of resources and, obviously, regulation. We understood that investing in innovation is critical in order to give our consumer added value. Technology can allow for productivity and efficiency, and also for product edge. It is my honor to invite Ms. Ofra Shtráoس to share with us Shtráoس Group innovation vision, past, present, and future. Ofra?
Wow. Can you hear me? Okay. So first of all, Shana Tova. Shana Tova to all of you. And in English, it's almost the same, Happy New Year. It's almost the same, but you know, the Happy New Year sounds better in December. But Shana Tova is the right place to say it here in Israel. It's really about starting something new. And when I'll say something that someone else said, and will sound probably very familiar to you, I have a dream. Or we had a dream. And I have to thank, really, when we say Shtráoس Group, or Shtráoس, it's really a team of people that are really, really believers. When they started with the whole idea, I said, well, go for it. I never thought it will get to that. But the one word that touched my heart, and that's the best way to move things with me, besides my head, is really, we really believe what we're doing here together will create a better world. When I started my job as a chair of the company, I have to say, I never thought how important food is. And with the years, I have to say, we all got used to the fact that we all have food. That it's not something which is in scarcity. In the last few years, I think we in the food industry, we in the world, the head of state, we understood that it's not going to stay like that. We were lucky. So we have together to make sure that it continues to be like that. Not only quantities, not only that food will be reachable, but good food, the right kind of food. So for all of you here, we have a big task, and it's an opportunity to say thank you to the Israeli government that really put it as one of their 10 years tasks, food technology. So Israel is known for a lot of things, but that's how we started, by the way, with food technology. Israel actually opened embassies by sharing food technology with emerging markets, and that's how they allowed us to have ambassadors in different places. So, but to put it again on the agenda, and maybe it will be our way, that's what the government said, and we are sharing with them the same vision, to reach out, to reach our hands to the rest of the world, and we say, let's do it together. There's something, those of us who were in the, we had our management meeting, GLT as we call it, and we looked at my father's mission, which is, he said to us one thing, there's nothing you can do by yourself, only together. Make sure that you stay together and we do things together. So all of you, let's stay together. Let's share the message. We can actually together do it. It doesn't matter if we are from the food industry, from the cosmetic, from the pharma, from the technology. Together, there is a huge, huge mission for us to do. To make sure that the world has better food, that every child can go to sleep without waking up hungry. It's all about us. When we said past, present, and future, I want to just take this opportunity and to say special thanks to a few very, very dear people to me. To you, Dr. Heffler. Not all of you know, Dr. Heffler was one of the first board members of Shtráoس. Many years ago, in the 70s, when no one talked in Israel about joint ventures, he actually was the one who represented Danone on our board. And if there is one thing that we all have to thank you, is that you believed in us before we really believed in ourselves. You believed that we can produce high quality product in the right way, that we can be a good or unbelievable employer, and you pushed us to our limits. So if this thing is one of the things you really believed we can do, thank you, Dr. Heffler, for making us what we are today, because we always remember that we are good because you told us we can, and the thing you taught us all the years, separating between board and management, what governance is, and like a German system, not only teaching us, the next visit he made sure that we are actually doing it. So for you, Dr. Heffler, you are the one who is responsible to what we are today. From the bottom of our heart, thank you for being here. He is celebrating the 90th birthday. Thank you. So, now with the years, we always say, if Dr. Heffler would know. So now all of you know who is this Dr. Heffler. Thank you again. I don't know if he is here, and I didn't ask his permission to mention his name, so I wouldn't mention his name, but I just want you to know that among us is the grandson of the founder of Danone. Daniel Carasso, who is the Carasso family, who is the founders and the inventor of the yogurt in the world. His grandson decided to make Aliyah and to invest on his grandfather's and grandmother's name in food technology. So he is somewhere here in the crowd, and if there is a way to close the circle, that's actually a great one. So welcome, Okay? As I said, I didn't ask his permission to mention his name, but it's definitely closing a circle. To you, Dr. Mahmoud Khan, who is the CTO of PepsiCo. PepsiCo is our partners. And for us, partnership is a way of living. I mentioned Danone. PepsiCo is really our partners now for years. And partnership is not just about doing business together. It's about friendship. It's about really sharing dreams. If there is someone who is sharing with us our dreams, and count on us, we are sharing your dreams for a better world, better food, better nutrition, and to be excellent in what we do. You are for us definitely a partner, a friend, and we are so happy you are here with us. Thank you. Another way to talk about partnership is really another guest that we have, Carl Haney. My first job after I finished the army and law school, I was accepted to work at Estee Lauder. Until today, Leonard Lauder is my mentor, teaching me how to be a better manager, a better chair, a better person. And we have here the CTO of Estee Lauder, Carl Haney, who is definitely part of what we are doing here today, sharing our dream, and what we discovered that cosmetics and food, at the base of what we do, is the same thing when it comes to technology. So Carl, thank you for being here, for sharing with us your know-how and your knowledge. And as I said, part of what I am today is really how your company opened their heart and accepted me to do my first job. So thank you. Thank you, all of you. And as we really believe together, we can change the world to be a better one. And the food industry today is expected to actually to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ofra. I would love to do something like telling everybody, you know, wave your hands or something, but hi. I'm Eyal Shimoni. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of the Shtráus Group, or as some call me, the Chief. You know, the global perspective for a food tech community is a vital part of knowledge for entrepreneurs to know where they really should head. At the beginning of this journey, we said something that we call the Tech Alliance. But since Ofra killed all my introduction notes by her inspiration, so the idea of the Tech Alliance was to have kind of a non-binding engagement of companies with a shared vision and shared value, and do it through food tech. And it is my utmost pleasure to invite our first foreign speaker, Dr. Mahmoud Khan, co-chair, vice chair of PepsiCo, Chief Scientific Officer of the company for Global Research and Development. Mahmoud, please.
I have no slides. I'll make this easy. I have no slides. Let me just grab. Can I take this off? I rarely use slides when I get a chance. I'd rather have a conversation and not show a lot of text and things and images. Perhaps it reflects what little I know. It's easier to just wing it. First of all, thank you, Ofra, for a wonderful partnership, and not only at a professional level, at a personal level. I won't recount over the last several years all the different things you and I have had a chance to engage in our families together. To Jonathan Berger for having the leadership. My flying buddy and co-pilot. We've got to go flying again. But I was asked to talk today about how our industry the food industry itself is getting disrupted. I don't think anybody in this audience needs me to tell any of you that disruption is here. It's not coming, it's here. We are getting disrupted. The question really is going to be what priorities, what choices, and how we're going to embrace this. And there are going to be companies that will embrace and grow, and there will be companies that will be challenged to embrace that. It's not because they're not smart. It's not because they don't have capable people. It'll be because they don't have the culture to embrace that change. And we all know in history lots of those examples. However, let me give you a little personal journey. When I joined PepsiCo 9 years ago as the global head of R&D, I'd never worked in the food and beverage industry. My first day on the job as chief was actually the first day I'd ever entered this industry. And what a vote of confidence and some high degree of risk by my boss, Indra Nui, for doing that, and I can tell you many media wrote about it at the time. 9 years ago, we started a journey where we said the future is different to the past. We have to do different things, and we have to transform our company, our people, our products, our processes, and our partners. And for a company that today has almost $70 billion in revenue, a system revenue of somewhere around $100 billion, we operate in 198 countries, and there are 1.5 billion people on the planet approximately that consume one of my products every day. So we're not talking about small systems by any means, and what we had to do was think about how are we going to bring about change in one of the largest global organizations on the planet in a systematic way, in a way that's sustainable for the future from a business point of view, and I'll talk about sustainable also from our clients and our stakeholders. And that's the part industry often used to speak the least about. And I'm going to speak the most about for the next few minutes. So the good news is we took on that challenge, and we had a lot of critics. Some said we've taken the eye off the ball, we should keep doing what we've always done successfully for 100 years. Pepsi's been around 100 years. Today, brand Pepsi, which we love, makes up just 12% of our company's revenue. That is how much we've transformed our corporation. 12% of PepsiCo is the brand Pepsi. In fact, the soda business and carbonated soft drinks make up about a quarter of our global business now. 3/4 is no longer that. A quarter of our business is what we call nutrition business and growing. Quaker, Tropicana, etc. Our wonderful partnership with Shtráus, Sabra, the hummus company. I can name numerous one of those. And there is probably nobody in the United States or in Western Europe that doesn't consume a PepsiCo product, even if they don't connect it to our company. Whether you go to Starbucks and buy a Frappuccino, not realizing that's a Pepsi product, or you pick up from our joint venture the Lipton iced teas, which are Pepsi, part of the JV that we have with Unilever, etc. But let me talk about choices. So we made choices on to transform the company. We made choices around how to change our products. However, let me give you a global context why today's discussion is far bigger than anything that Pepsi or any one of the companies in this room has to talk about. Today, there are about 7 billion people on our planet. By 2050, which is within the lifetime of most people in this room, and happy birthday, I hope by 2050 we're celebrating this again with you. By 2050, there will be 9.5 billion people on the planet. We are going to add 2.5 billion people, and out of those 2.5 billion people, today, out of the 7.5, 1 billion go to bed hungry every night. 1 billion people are hungry out of 7. We add 2.5 billion more people with no more water than we already have, with no more land than we already have. And that's something that Israel has been at the forefront of technology in water conservation and land use. But if you think about it from a global point of view, if we add 2.5 billion more people, and we do not solve the technology side of this equation, we will be adding 2 billion more hungry people on the planet. When 3 billion people are hungry out of 9, this world has no idea about what conflict means when you have 3 billion people hungry. This is about choices, but those are choices that none of us should have to make. Choices about whether we should feed our child or whether we can feed our child or not. This is not about what we wear. It's not about what we appear. This is not about luxury. This is about basic, fundamental rights of every human being, that is the access to adequate, clean, nutritious food. So disruption is going to happen for a number of reasons, and in my opinion, the most powerful of which will be the fact that humans will demand that basic right. So it is our job as an industry to think about the future in a very, very different way. And I'm going to spend the second half of my comments talking about how we're thinking about it at PepsiCo. Some of you may not be aware, but I chair all of PepsiCo's sustainability agenda. I am responsible for leading a team that's thinking about our planet, population, people, product, and integrating all of those sustainable inputs, whether it's energy, carbon, water, agriculture, into what Pepsi's future strategy is. And it's a massive task. I'm blessed. I've got some wonderful people working with me in the company and on the outside. So let's talk a little bit about these choices. In the last decade, what we talked about product and sustainability from a human point of view was removing things. Less sugar, less saturated fat, less salt. We did that. We've led the industry in salt reduction. Today, a bag of Lay's has less salt than a single slice of white bread. That's how much we've been able to lower it using technology. However, similarly, we've looked at this with fat, we've looked at this with sugar. We've launched globally in 7-Up. Around the world, 7-Up has been reduced to 100 calories per 12 ounce. We have some of the most cutting-edge sweetener and sugar technology on the planet, all the way into, from molecular biology, receptor technology, all the way through to ingredient and chemistry. That's not going to be enough. And that's what I want to talk about. Not what we've done, but what it's going to take. From a supply chain point of view, we have lowered our plastic footprint. We have removed plastic from our packaging. We've reduced our energy use, and we've reduced our water use. As an example of that recognition, about a year ago, we won the most prestigious water prize on the planet, which was the Oslo Water Prize. We led the industry in how to think about water use. However, it's not enough, and here's why. Reducing our water use in our operating plants is critical. We've created in India, at Nilamangala, a zero liquid discharge manufacturing plant where we actually waste no water. We've created the world's only factory which is 100% powered by sustainable energy. In fact, we give a net electricity back to the grid. If you want to see that, it's a full manufacturing plant in Arizona, the first of its kind in the world. It's one thing to run your home sustainably. It's one thing to build a factory that's completely able to come off the grid in its use of electricity. So we've gone a long way. It's not enough, and here's why. If you think about a typical food and beverage company, 7% of its water footprint is in its own operations. 93% of its water footprint is outside its own operations. So if you reduce your own water footprint in your operations by 20%, 25, 30%, all you've done is taken away about 2% of your water footprint from a fully integrated supply chain. Historically, we used to talk about sustainability and disruption as what was better than the past. And you hear every company talk about it. We're going to be better than the past. We all do that. That's important. It's not enough. Why isn't it enough? Because better is delaying the inevitable if it's not enough. Understand what I'm trying to say. If what you do is reduce your carbon footprint, you will reduce the rate of global warming. But if you do not reduce it enough, it will not prevent it. You have to get to sufficient reduction where it actually means you've changed the long-term, not only trajectory, but direction. And that means you're going to have to look outside your own four walls. You're going to have to look outside your factory, your warehouse, your shop, your distribution vehicle. You're going to have to look vertically and horizontally in the ecosystem to change the planet. And what this means is change the future not only for ourselves, but our children and our grandchildren are going to demand that that's what we should have done. Let's not leave it too late. So let me bring that to life. As we look to the future at PepsiCo, we are starting to look at not PepsiCo's footprint, but our global footprint. When we talk about planet, we're talking about water across our ecosystem, all the way through to the farm. When we start to talk about energy, we have to look at it in an integrated manner. It is no longer sufficient. I was speaking recently to several ministers of science and technology, and I asked a question because there was a lot of pride, understandably, of the fact that in this region of the world, carbon footprint had remained horizontal even though the population had grown. That's great. Then I asked a different question. What has happened to the carbon footprint of the countries that supply you your food? And of course, if you look at Latin America as an example, it's gone up. So it's no longer sufficient to say in my own back door, I'm flat, but I'm buying my food from across the world, and there it's going up. You have to look at it and say, what did I do? What was my impact on the planet? We live on the same planet. As you said, it's sharing, it's reaching out, and it's collaborating. So as we looked across, we started looking at this. Now, let me talk a little bit about some of the opportunities and how we started looking at this. About 4 years ago, we started asking ourselves, if we start to look at farmers, for example, how are we going to do this if we don't know practices on a farm? So we launched an initiative called the Sustainable Farming Initiative, where we've started to, on the cloud, to create applications where farmers can upload their practices that supply goods to us, potatoes, citrus, oats. We open it up to North America first. We've now opened it up, starting to open it up in Europe. And already we have 15,000 farmers who have now signed up. We are now tracking 300,000 acres of farming on the cloud. As this grows, and this I think is just the tip of the iceberg, as this becomes from 15,000 to 150,000 farmers, as this goes from 300,000 acres to 3 million acres, we will start to understand what are best practices, what our suppliers need to do, and how to change their practices from region to region. As they start to share best practices, we become a catalyst for change. We're no longer just the package company. We will help drive that change. And this is not theory. As I said, 15,000 farmers are already part of that ecosystem. We help build it, design it, partner with it, and deploy it. Now we're working with academia, universities. Numerous universities around the world are now becoming to partner. And I have a vision, it's a hope. Can you imagine this rich ecosystem of data, of hundreds of thousands of farmers, millions of acres, that academia and government and our partners can tap into, start to understand, and then let it accelerate into other crops, and crops that we do not engage in today, but crops of the future. While we don't share any individual farmer's identity, they have an opportunity to understand in their nation, in their region, in their state, what are best practices, who has the best yields, what are they doing. And I don't just mean yield, but efficiency as well. Water use, fertilizer use, pesticide use. Again, to emphasize this point, I helped lead to launch with partners, not just our traditional suppliers, but we launched an initiative with Walmart, Cargill, General Mills, ourselves, and others earlier this year, which an initiative called the Midwest Row Crop Initiative. Why is that important? Because historically, what was done in the Midwest of the United States was the problem of the Midwest. What was happened in the South was far away, but the two became linked. Let me explain. The Gulf of Mexico around Louisiana and Alabama today has an ocean which is a dead zone. That Z zone is about the size of the state of New Jersey. So think of the size of Israel, now think of the state of New Jersey. That dead zone is the size of New Jersey, and it is a dead zone which is affecting the livelihoods of fishermen, local ecosystem. However, it is a dead zone because of the runoff of the river Mississippi coming from all of the output of the farmers of the upper Midwest. So we no longer, even within one nation, live in separate neighborhoods. What we do in the Midwest is affecting, and if we, the food industry, don't change the practice of the Midwest who supply to us, we will be destroying the livelihood and the ecosystem of the Gulf of Mexico and the southern states. Imagine now that in North Africa, in Asia, and in Europe, and this is the world we're living. So disruption, my friends, is not just a small tech company coming up with a software that's going to disrupt us. Disruption is going to disrupt livelihoods. Disruption is about the future of our children, and as I said, our grandchildren. And as I look to finish, let me talk a little bit about more on the how. We've taken out, in my team, we have some wonderful scientists. We removed, or in a typical year, about 110 million pounds of packaging across PepsiCo's ecosystem. 100 million pounds reduction. Is that enough? Absolutely not. But that happened because we reduced the weight, we reduced the thinness, we improved the efficiency, we reduced the waste, all of that. But those, to me, are incremental changes. It does not lead us to a different future, just delays the inevitable. We have to change our practices, and that's what I want to finish on. Let's talk about people. There's two aspects to people. We've thought about people as talent, and of course people as consumers, ultimately consume our products. Let me talk about the talent part. When I joined our company, my heads of R&D were 100% male, which is interesting since 70% of the products we make were bought by women. 100% male, 100% trained in the United States, and not one of them had a background in life sciences. And that struck me, since I'm a medical physician, practiced at the Mayo Clinic all my career, and I come from the medical industry and pharma industry with a background in life sciences to a food industry, and I asked myself, last time I thought my understanding was this was for human consumption, and understanding the human body should be sort of part of the discussion. But our industry typically has been about processing, efficiency, engineering, all important things in how to make food, but not important from an understanding of what we should make. How should we grow it? What's it going to do to our ecosystem? And that's where I said, okay, the future is different. Today, more than half of my executive team are women. 3 of them have done their PhDs outside the United States. They have diverse backgrounds from biochemistry to life sciences to veterinary medicine to organic chemistry to engineering. Very diverse leadership team, and that is now being reflected down the organization. And through that diversity of thought, everybody talks about diversity of appearance. I'm no more Asian than somebody in Chicago, and I've never lived in Asia. I'm second generation. It's not about how we look, it's about how we think. Thought is the important part of diversity. Perspective is the important part of diversity. And it was that thought and perspective that has started to change what PepsiCo is about. As we think about people and consumers, let me just add to the fact that what we have to remember is that our company and our industry has always asked a very simple question: can we solve this problem? It's been about can we. It's about how. I think the most difficult question is not the can or the how. I had the honor of giving a commencement speech this year at the University of Minnesota, and I'll challenge you with the same question I challenged those graduating students. It's not about how, and it's not about can we. The question is, should we? Because we have to ask ourselves as leaders, we might be able to do it, is it the right thing? Let me give you an example. So many companies talk about their sustainability agenda. And our history was, I'm going to focus on an area, environment. I'm going to reduce my environmental footprint. Very noble. But I'm going to continue to sell the same sugar, fat, and salt that I always did. I'm just going to do it environmentally sustainably. That's not good enough. Or I'm going to reduce the amount of salt and sugar in my products, but I'm not going to care about the planet. I'm not going to care about my employees. And by employees, I do not any longer mean the people working in my factory, in my office. I'm talking about the farmer working in the field who's growing the crop that's supplying you the ingredients that you're going to use to manufacture. That is an extension of your workforce. And how many of us have taken our codes of conduct and extended them all the way in to our supply chain? Those are sorts of questions that I mean by should we? How are we going to do this? And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, if we get all of this right, we will not be in a world that is asking our children and our grandchildren to reflect back and look back at our generation and say, if only they should have done this, if only they could have done this. Because some of this is going to be irreversible. But most importantly, I hope no mother has to make the choice of whether they can or cannot feed their child the next morning. And that's where everybody in this room, it's not about your small startup company or a big company. It's exactly as Ofer said. Can we collectively together have the courage and wisdom to bring ourselves together to solve, in my mind, the greatest problem our planet has ever faced in humanity? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mahmoud. In order to build a sustainable community, one needs at least 3 things to start with. The first one, entrepreneurs, innovation, IP. I hope that you had a chance to see some of them in the pavilion, and you'll have a chance to see them on stage later today. The second, industry experts, food and beverage companies, the main platform to develop, deploy, and commercialize the innovation. And last but not least is capital. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to promote tech innovation initiatives without the dedicated capital. When we first approached some of the VCs to promote food tech, just like high tech, clean tech, biomed, cyber, it was not easy, to put it mildly. Many preferred to put their capital on things they had experience at, with tangible ROIs and clear case studies. It took time, but today, food tech investment is no longer a niche. Some of the large funds get into food tech. Other dedicated funds were established just to invest in that area. In 2015, for example, more than 20 investment bodies were established. It is very interesting to hear what the investors have to say. And I'm pleased to invite some of the more active food tech investors and Jonathan Berger, the Kitchen CEO, to host the panel.
Wow. To say that I'm excited is a bit banal, but it is what it is. It is really amazing. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I want to invite to the investors panel 4 investors who came here from around the world. And first, Dan Phillips from Cultivian Sandbox. Dan? While Dan is coming, I will share with you that Dan is a hiker, loves to hike, and he has been to more than 30 national parks in the United States so far. Thank you for coming from Chicago, Dan. Chris Kerr, are you here, Chris? New Crop Capital. Chris and his wife rescue a lot of animals. And he told me that one of the 2 favorite rescues that he had were 2 baby deer that they raised and freed to the wild, right? So welcome, Chris, and thank you for coming from San Francisco. The next guest in our panel would be Mathieu. I hope I pronounce it right, Mathieu Vermersch. Mathieu, are you here? Shared with me that he sponsors a professional cycling team in Kenya, and his vision is that within 10 years, Kenya would be number 1, you said, in the professional cycling. So thank you, Mathieu, for coming from Singapore. We have one more panelist, but I was told that he's late. Good thing that he's a marathon runner, so I'm sure he would make it just before his turn to speak about his fund. And the exciting thing that I cannot wait to share with you, by the way, his name is Martin Goussin from Antera Capital, and he shared with me that one of the most exciting marathons that he ran, and Eyal Shimoni can relate to that, was in Kenya, in a wildlife reserve, and he was running the marathon surrounded by zebras and rhinos with guards protecting him from the lions and leopards. So Moran is there making sure that he gets him directly, and when he comes in, please give him a round of applause. So we would start with a few general questions, and why don't you, Dan, start with giving us a few words about what you do, the fund, what type of investments you're making, and what is the sweet spot of size of investment that you do.
Happy to. On here. Take this one. I'll fix it in here. Yeah, and thanks for having me, Jonathan. It's good to be here from Chicago. So as you mentioned, we are based in the U.S. We're a pure play food and agriculture technology focused venture fund. Interesting background of the fund, the founding principles all come from the food and ag industry and include the former CEO of NutraSweet, Nick Rosa, former CEO of Monsanto, Bob Shapiro, and Ron Musin and Andy Zolkowski. Ron is a PhD plant scientist who spent much of his career running biotech research at Dow Agro. So across the group, bring a lot of industry expertise in food and agriculture. And we also have a group of investors in the funds that include large corporates in the business, such as DuPont and Elanco and about half a dozen others. So it's a close relationship between our fund, our large corporate partners, and then the entrepreneurs and startups that we invest in. With respect to investment size, we're typically investing in $3 to $5 million in a first round with capital reserve for follow-on, a lot of Series A and Series B type investing. Much of it to date has been a little bit more upstream on the ag tech side with respect to crop production, crop protection, animal health diagnostics and therapeutics. But then we've also invested in some food safety companies and have looked at a number of food technology companies. So I'll pause there. Did I cover the topics you wanted to get through?
Yeah, I wondered if one of your companies or portfolio companies already working with PepsiCo and the initiative, the amazing initiative that Mahmoud shared with us?
Unfortunately, not yet. Although
So it's a good opportunity.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's also a good opportunity for us to do more food tech investing. As I mentioned, much of our investing to date has been upstream in the value chain. But as we're seeing, evolving consumer demands and regulatory demands, and even the business incentive for corporates to innovate in this space and bring new products to market, we see it as a great investment opportunity.
And I know that you guys come often to Israel. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, this is a really hectic week in Israel. Tomorrow we have AgriVest, and Nitza is here, and I wish you a great event tomorrow. That's for AgTech, but I know you guys come often to Israel. Can you share with us your perspective about Israeli innovations?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think it's hard to find a greater concentration of entrepreneurial spirit, as well as some of the corporates that are interested in food and agriculture innovation. So it's a good place for us to visit. There's a wide variety of technology developments and exciting things happening here. And so this week is a great opportunity to connect with that ecosystem and hopefully find some potential partners and investment opportunities.
Okay, great. So I can assure you that as soon as we have a break, lots of entrepreneurs would come and would pitch to you. So be prepared, have your business cards, and I wish them all luck.
I'll look forward to it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's break the order. Matteo, are you okay with the jet lag coming from a long way?
I'm fine.
Okay, great. So you visited the kitchen, so I personally know about the amazing things that you guys are doing, and why don't you share that with the audience?
Sure. So we are fund based out of Singapore. We looked at the food chain and the agriculture situation, and we've decided to focus on what we think are the larger three problems affecting the entire ecosystem today. One is this whole issue of animal protein production. How do we produce animal protein in a more sustainable way? How do we replace animal protein? What are the new technologies out there? So that's one big focus of what we do, is everything around animal protein production. The other focus for us is this whole interaction between food and health. We think we are at the beginning of understanding exactly how does food and the body interact. And we think that the challenge as far as health costs are concerned, over the next 20 years, we will have to improve tremendously. How do we understand food and health interaction? So we think there is an enormous array of innovation that's going to come out of that. And our third area of interest and investment is anything that's related to food safety and food waste. We are stunned to see that there is so much money invested in yield improvement for a few percent at the crop level, while 30% of what we produce end up being wasted. And again, a lot of innovation that needs to happen. We are very much problem-driven. We identify big problems. We spend months researching who's it out there, who's doing what, and then try to find whether there is anything we could invest. So we are extremely proactive in the way we build our portfolio.
Is it okay that you would share with us some examples from your portfolio, or it's all under the radar?
No. Well, I think one thing which is fairly high profile, it's a company in Ireland named Nuritas. Nuritas was basically out of a project out of UCD in Dublin. Now it's a fairly large, it's a 20 people company now. Nuritas is at the forefront of what could eventually happen in terms of understanding better, again, food and health relationship. Nuritas has built an artificial intelligence system that helps predict therapeutic effect of certain peptide you find in food stream. So we are talking about something that could eventually completely change the way we analyze food ingredients and how we build food ingredients to improve health.
So you managed to cooperate with universities. That's a challenging task.
It's okay.
Okay. Now, being an investor located in Singapore, do you see any additional value that you bring to the entrepreneurs, to the startup, like a bridge to Eastern Asia?
Yeah, there's two things here. First is that any business model we looked and any success story will have to have an Asian dimension. We think that the Asian consumer will have exactly the same requirements as the Western consumers very, very soon. So anything that's done in the Western world in terms of efficiency, in terms of safety, in terms of all sorts of new technology will have to be successful in an Asian context. So that's what we bring to some of the investors that we are looking at.
Okay, and last question about the size of check that you usually write. What is your sweet spot?
Anywhere between $500 to $3 million.
So you start $500,000,
yes.
$3 million is your top. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Chris. I'm excited to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming from a long way. Can you share with us a little bit about what you guys are doing? And it's
Sure. So New Crop Capital is laser focused on, our thesis is that the animal-based agriculture is flawed on a bunch of different levels. It's a 10,000-year-old industry that we've kind of bought into, and it's become so enmeshed in our lives that disrupting it is very, very hard. It's a $1 trillion industry every year. We make a big fuss about about disrupting the taxi cab business. That's a $50 billion business. We're talking about something that's monumental. We're a $25 million fund, so what can we do with that, right? We're going to be early stage investors. We want to invest in innovation. We want to invest in production, distribution, and we want to create convenience as well. So our thesis is if we can create really, really tasty food, make it price competitive, and make it available for people, we don't have to have an ethical discussion about whether or not you should be eating animals or not. And so really we are looking at the animals as a flawed model. If you look at the inefficiency that comes with that, which is in the case of a cow, it's about 40 calories in to 1 calorie out. The only way you can make any business that has that kind of inefficiency work is by making it operationally insanely efficient. Unfortunately, the costs of doing that in animal agriculture really push those costs onto other people. And so it comes in at the expense of carbon emissions or land degradation, healthcare issues, food scarcity. All of those things are kind of the byproduct of that industry. And so we're trying to figure out how we can invest in innovation in a way that will basically get those same nutrients, get that same profile. People eat animals because they want taste, they want those nutrients, they need something to live off. We want to find other ways of getting it there that can be a lot more efficient. But as early stage investors with $25 million, we're trying to transform a $10 billion or $10 trillion or $1 trillion industry. That's a pretty big ask. So one of the things that we really focus on is being the first investors in there, but making sure we syndicate every deal. We want as much money around the table as possible, but we also want to get these early stage companies up into the bigger checkbooks as quickly as possible. So we really do want to invest in an ecosystem that takes companies from 0 to $10 million in sales as quickly as possible so that we can send them off to college and get on with the next babies. So,
Thank you. Well, I cannot hold myself from asking about technology, having so many technological people in the audience here. So question to the audience, how many of you know what is cellular ag? Please raise your hand. Cellular ag. Cellular ag. Okay. Agriculture.
That hand in the
cellular
back,
agriculture.
she's with us. She's with the Good Food Institute. So.
Okay, so you see, you have to give everybody a quick, it's a 30 seconds about technology now, but let's listen to cellular ag because I know that what you guys are doing is very focused on cellular ag.
Cellular ag is, I would equate it to in 1950s saying, let's go to the moon. And people would say, okay, well, what does that take? Do we have a rocket that would get us there? And you think that if you solved the rocket issue, therefore you could get to the moon, but there's about 1,000 other things that need to be involved with that. So when we're looking at taking a single cell or a couple of cells from an animal and getting it in the perfect environment to do what it does best, which is just grow and divide, we kind of look at it as maybe what indoor tomato farming may be. You know, you want to create that perfect environment so that these plants can do what they do best, which is grow, create tomatoes, drop seeds, and we eat that. So we're looking at cellular agriculture in a similar way, but there's a lot of hurdles that need to get solved from a technology standpoint in there. And so our mandate, we have a twofold mandate on our investments. One is we want to do the moonshot. We know that not everybody's going to move to a plant-based diet, and so for those of you who want to keep eating animals, we're going to meet you where you are. We're not going to fight that fight. We'd rather use technology to solve that. But if we do it, if we can accomplish that, even if we can get some of these things accomplished, we're already able to create gelatin as an example. Like we can do that today. We're doing it with dairy. We're doing it with casein. We're doing it with protein. So there's things that we can do today that are really about scaling. And then the other side of what we're doing is advancing the plant-based alternatives, which are just going gangbusters. 10 years ago, the plant-based dairy industry was about 0.5%, maybe 1%. Today it's 9%. That's a massive, massive disruption, and it's growing. It's one of the fastest sectors. And those who invested in that space ended up actually being the dairy industry. Like they kind of redefined who they were. And so we're looking at how we can redefine the meat business, the protein business, and we're looking at cellular agriculture as that moonshot that says, look, if people want to eat meat, let's just create meat.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, so we would go now for general questions to the panel, and I want to start with something that we all see. 2015 was a record year for investment, generally speaking, and the food tech was part of that. We see kind of a slowdown in 2016 so far, and we are looking at the half-year report that AgFunder published with a run rate of 150 investment for the year, which will total $500 million. This is food tech investments for 2016. I would love to hear your comments about what are the characteristics of food tech investments. And people are talking about longer term for returns and challenges in scale up. In your eyes, Dan, what are the challenges of food tech investments?
Sure. So in many cases, you're dealing with high volume, low margin products. So startup companies that are trying to get to a proof of concept from a technology standpoint and translate that from the lab to servicing a much larger market that's going to be required to produce a business of a meaningful size is incredibly challenging. So we do, as investors, tend to focus more on the kind of B2B technology side of the food industry, more so than direct to consumer and creating new food brands, because that can be tremendously expensive and risky. So that's, as we're kind of going through our diligence process, we're oftentimes focused on those technology differentiators that are going to produce something of high value, and that could be with respect to what actually goes into the food, how it's moved around, how it's tested, and how it's produced. That will be attractive both to consumers as well as the large corporates in the space.
Yeah, we look at two things. One, we want there to be a technological hurdle in there that's novel, and we also actually like there to be fairly good barriers to entry, because that means that technology will really drive that. Everybody's grandmother has the best tomato sauce, and everybody wants to take that to market. You made it. Yes. And so basically we just look for something that's innovative, that will be massively disruptive in our case. We are really looking for really big, long-term changes in animal agriculture. So for us, we need there to be a technological hurdle that will lead to that.
Okay. Are you okay? Yeah. So everybody told us about their fund in few sentences, actually 2 minutes. Why don't you share with us what is your field of investments, what are your sweet spots, what size of checks do you usually write, and if you can share some of the investment you already did in the sphere of food tech.
Sure. So sorry for mixing up my time zones there, but thank you for having me here, Jonathan. I am with Antera Capital, so I'm one of the founders of Antera, which was initiated actually within the Rabobank group. Over 7 years ago, we started on a journey there when food and ag tech wasn't really a sector. It was seen as a subset of clean tech. But that is hugely different today, luckily. So today, we are backed by both Rabobank and Fidelity, the asset manager out of Boston. We're a $125 million fund with offices in Amsterdam and Boston. We focus on North America, Europe, and Israel, although we look at the rest of the world as well, as the food space is such a global play. The typical sweet spot for us lies at around $5 million investment as an initial ticket, with follow-ons going up to 15 million per company. And then where do we invest? So we look across the whole food value chain, from inputs for animals and plants all the way down to the consumer, and anywhere in between where technology verticals like software, biotechnology, material sciences, and fintech can play a role to transform that industry. I must say that the sweet spot differs per area. So every area has its own characteristics. Within biotech, we do consider pre-revenue businesses. But in most of the other areas, we do want to see revenue because it's the most important way to validate if a product or service is actually working. Just by way of example, if you look in the precision agriculture space, there are over 300 companies there in our database, and out of that, I think less than 5% have actually something to offer to the farmer. So that is an important indicator. Revenue shows you that there's real traction and there's a real product. I'll leave it with that for now.
Okay, thank you. Matteo, that's a question for you. Let's talk about the people. We have more than 100 entrepreneurs here today with us. What are the things that you are looking when an entrepreneur approaches you, and what are the important things in the team before you make the investment?
Yeah, for two things. I mean, clearly there is a lot more good ideas than there is good management. And that has been a big surprise for us as we're going along this journey, is that we find a lot of good business. We find less great team to execute on those business. So that's number one issue. The second issue is that we tend to find that startups are extremely ambitious when they don't have any money, and then they tend to be extremely conservative when they have the money. It should be the other way around for us. We think that the mortality rate in a portfolio is going to be very high. We're here to take risk. So we want the company in which we invest to keep the big ideas and to being able to deliver on the big picture. That was the hook for us at the first place. So we're not here to help them manage their quarter or the 6 months or the cash burn on a day-to-day basis. We're here to help them really work hard to execute on the big picture, knowing that, again, there's going to be a lot of risk along the line. But I think that's the problem. Many companies, once they have the check, tends to be fairly much more conservative and kind of lose out on what was the big thing originally.
Excellent tip. Any additions?
The other half of New Crop Capital is the Good Food Institute, was a nonprofit that is really the backbone of what we do. And that entity is loaded with the real talent. You know, we've got 3 decision makers who decide where the money goes, but a lot of entrepreneurs actually need a lot of mentoring. And to your point, you can sometimes create a great management team, and sometimes they need to be prepared for the fact that most entrepreneurs have their own sweet spot, right? Some people are great at taking companies from 0 to 5 million, but it's a whole new team that comes in after that to 20 and another one that gets to 100. So sometimes you got to plant that seed early on to let them know that thank you for founding this company. There's going to come a time where that transition is going to need to happen. And so we try to help set those seeds and make sure that they understand the evolution of a business.
Okay. I have another question for you because we're running out of time.
Sure.
We have a lot of industry players here, global food companies. What is the role that you see for the industrial players in the interaction with the investment group?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's one that we want to see become closer. I think, as Dr. Khan mentioned, the world is changing, and the need for large food and beverage companies to be a leader in that front is growing. And I think PepsiCo and Shtráus have shown an ability to do that. I think where a lot of entrepreneurs get hung up is that oftentimes some of the large companies don't have a repeatable and efficient way of working with startups. Oftentimes startups are working through existing channels with the external facing R&D of an organization or the partnerships group. And there needs to be a recognition that startups have a different set of resources and an ability to go in timelines, frankly, to get through those checks and processes within a big organization. So some of the more successful companies that we've seen in this space have found a way to have a separate unit specifically dedicated to a way of working with startups that recognizes sometimes the needs and limitations of bringing new technologies to market.
Excellent, thank you. And the last question, you would start, but that's a question to all the panel. What are the areas that you think are here to stay when we are looking on food tech investments? What are the long-term?
So, taking it at a higher level, I think the trend in different areas of the value chain is the move to more natural solutions. So that means in the animal production chain, for example, alternatives to antibiotics, where we can think about probiotics, prebiotics, plant extracts. A similar analogy you can lay over the agriculture piece, where we see more biofertilizers, biopesticides coming into the industry. But also if you pull that further down into the midstream and downstream area of the chain, you'll see the CPG companies producing more natural products. I learned the other day from PepsiCo that that's also part of their strategy to integrate more natural basically ingredients in all their products. They just brought out a new Gatorade, which is completely natural, as I understood it. And so that will flow all the way through the consumer, who is already buying all kind of natural replacements. So that's one area, and then I'll dive into three others, which is just more high level. I think automation is going to make a big difference, again, throughout different areas of the chain. Convenience for consumers, and let me see. There's a raft of things I believe is going to happen around breeding, and actually one of our portfolio companies plays in that field. It's Caribou. It's commercializing CRISPR-Cas9, which could have a whole new opportunity beyond the past GM debate, because this is not a GM technology, and that could open up consumer markets like fruit and veg, but also the animal breeding space. So I'm going to expect a lot from that area as well.
Okay, what is here to stay, please?
I definitely see the trend that's happening in plant-based milks. We know that that's here to stay, right? And so that major disruption has happened. We got 9% of that industry. Right now, plant-based meats is 1/4%. And so if we feel like if we can use some innovation to actually bump that up so that's at the same line as what dairy is, we're talking about eliminating about 9 billion animals a year from the market, mostly chickens, right? So that's a massive impact that you could have just by a kind of a fairly minor change in diet. And so we're looking at that as an opportunity for investors, as great growth opportunity.
Sure, I'll just tack on one more quickly. Martin talked about the trend in natural foods, which I agree is here to stay. I think paired with that is food safety and traceability. So there have been a number of well-publicized contaminations and food outbreak events in the U.S. that have impacted some pretty large brands. And I think those large buyers are finding it challenging to manage supply chain and quality as they work with a larger number of growers and producers. So that's an area that I think will be here to stay as well.
So stay tuned to get the Back to Sense presentation during the pitches later on. So please close this panel with your view of what's here to stay.
One more thing, I think it's a personalized nutrition. I think we're going to be in a world where food have to be part of the solution and no more part of the problem. And that is a huge thing. And I think that even if we don't want it, I think, again, the economics of health cost, that's going to be for the next generation, is going to be so tremendous that, food and health will have to converge into a better way. I live in Singapore, and Singapore has a very, very strong and ambitious program in this field.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody, for your insights. Pleasure.
Well, before the break, I'd just like to share with you something, and maybe to summarize some of the things we heard and some of the things we are still going to hear. As you know, our president, or ex-president, Shimon Peres, is not in good health, and he is in a hospital today. But he's definitely one of those visionaries that talks about technology and talks about food very often. And I had the privilege of talking to him around a month ago. And I shared with him how difficult it is because we see two trends from our people, from our consumers. One is all natural. We want to see you actually picking the vegetables or the fruits from the field and giving it to us as they were. Please don't change anything. On the other hand, we see that it's not going to be enough. Going back to the, growing vegetables, it will not work. So he said to me, Ofra, technology without ethics is really, really dangerous. Ethics without technology will take us back to the cave time. So the only way to the future is combining ethics and technology. So if there is one way or one challenge to all of us is to make sure that while we invent all this amazing technology for the future, we really combine them with state-of-the-art ethical approach towards this world. Only the two of them together will get that to the future that we want. That was the explanation I got from Shimon Peres, and I'm just handing it to you with a really pray that he will recover and maybe next year we'll be on this stage. Thank you, and it's break time.
"20 minutes coffee break and check out the pavilion. There are great startups to see there."